Well, let's bring in Dr. Constance Ikokwu for analysis of those big stories. She's a journalist and she's a Rise News analyst as well as a social commentator. Dr. Constance Ikokwu, your list of introduction is getting longer by the day, and we do love it. Thank you for being here with us to analyze the big stories.
Thanks for having me this morning.
I mean, where do we want to start? Most of the stories are just very heartbreaking and disheartening. Perhaps we should look at what Shehu Sani is saying on the front page of this day this morning. After state police conversation last week between President Bola Tinubu and the governors, where they seem to be on the same page for the very first time, former lawmaker Shehu Sani is saying that it's a mirage and a recipe for anarchy. What do you think? Yes,
Adesua, thanks for introducing that story. You see, it's a critical story for Nigeria. State police is a debate that has been on for at least 15 years in Nigeria. And I think the discourse stems from the belief that we practice a very warped system of federal government, where the center has extensive powers, thereby suffocating the regions or the federating units, if you will. So the argument is that policing is local. The federal government has proved to be unable to manage a lot of the crises that we face. So why not allocate more resources to the state governments, and the policemen can be drawn from the community where they come from, where they speak the language, they are aware of the area, people confide more in them, and then, you know, you do a better job. Proponents say, you know, this is the way forward, but there are people that are afraid, like Shehu Sani and many other Nigerians who have expressed concern that this may be abused by politicians, especially state governors who act as emperors. And the instructive thing at this one is that President Bola Tinubu was a proponent of state police when he was governor of Lagos State. So it's interesting that this is being considered under his presidency. It's not surprising at all, because he has wanted to go along
it's in
with
his manifesto, the Renewed Hope agenda.
Yes. So the point then is, whatever we've been doing has not worked. Maybe it's time to try something different.
All right, let's look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper. Two stories stand out there. It says, truck owner strike, minister intervenes as fuel queues build up. And then hardship, no end in sight as protest continues with two riders that I will read out. We're hungry, tired, or your residents cry out. Labour mobilizes for nationwide protest. Next week, someone says you can't beat a child and tell her not to cry.
That's a good one. You cannot beat a child and ask them not to cry. So the protests have been popping up in a couple of states, and it's not unfair for people to demand improved standards of living, especially in this time where the prices of food are going through the roof. And so what you're seeing is that people are saying we have lost confidence in the government to do better, and so we need to see results quickly. I think one thing to draw from this story is that election has consequences. I mean, we're seeing that especially low-income earners, their wages have been wiped out due to hyperinflation, which stands at about 30%. And there are predictions that this will even increase to over 40%, which is frightening. And so elections have consequences. You know, the APC government, the past 8 years was a disaster. We are in another APC government. There's no sympathy for this government. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done. I sense more trouble. You know, it's not going to be easy. I think that the government needs to do more.
How would protests help that? You said there's a lot to be done. How would protest help that?
Well, when you say, you just said that you cannot beat a child and expect them not to cry. People will continue to express displeasure with the biting hardship on their lives. You know, it's the staple of a democracy. If you do not say something, then the government doesn't understand how deep the crisis is. So, you know, people will continue to express their mind.
And one hopes
and you cannot stop that. Yeah.
A sense of urgency to understand the plight of the people. When you say there's problem, I mean, if you look at the front pages this morning, there's a recurring story, and the Nigerian Tribune made it its lead story. The meeting between the manufacturers of cement and the federal government yesterday, particularly the Minister of Works and his counterpart from Trade and Investment. And they have now agreed to sell cement not higher than 8,000 naira, depending on the location. It could go as low as 7,000 naira in some places. The consequences of this, Dr. Ikokwu, when you have cement prices skyrocketing. I saw a funny video, well, perhaps not funny. And someone was making a comparison between the thickness of cement that were produced months ago and the thickness of what we have now. The margin is a lot. We have a lot thinner blocks being made, you know, because people are trying to cut costs.
You know, Adesua, this is a story that goes to the heart of everything we're talking about. We live in Abuja where there's a lot of construction going on. So when you talk to people in the construction business, whether it's architects, engineers, they will tell you that they are shocked. Every week, in fact, in a week, the price changes at least 3 times. You know, astronomical. And people are really afraid and asking what is going on. So it's good that we are seeing that government is trying to intervene there. The Minister of Works and the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment having a discussion with cement manufacturers. And the other thing is that while we say Nigerians are suffering, the companies are declaring high profits, whether it's the banks, whether it's, you know, the big businesses, not the tiny ones that are affording. Yes. So the fact that they are discussing and saying the prices have to be 7,000 to 8,000 is good. The thing is, will you be able to manage all of the distributors? Some distributors might not sell at that price. And for how long can you stop them from, you know, increasing prices? So that's what we're going to see over the next couple of months, how this works out.
Let's look at The Guardian, talking about infrastructure, road development, actually. What The Guardian paper is saying, AG is granting 4 trillion tax credit in 5 years as inflation threatens scheme. And right on there, it says inflation may slow that pace.
So that story came up when the conversation was going on in the Senate about taxes, the collection of taxes, and presentations to the Senate Committee on Taxation. And it was revealed that 19 trillion is the prediction for tax collection in 2024. And so because the government wants to drive up revenue, they are asking them to see if they can increase it to 30 trillion. So that means that all the tax waivers, which they say has been abused by people in the past or companies, those tax waivers were put in place in order to increase and encourage investment. But obviously there has been some abuse. And in fact, there has been a 2.7 trillion tax credit given to some companies for road construction. The Senate is also saying that needs to be suspended or go outrightly. So again, government trying to see if they can increase revenue for the country in these very difficult circumstances.
Dr. Ikokwu, let's go back to the crisis we have in our hands when it comes to food. It's not all doom and gloom. If you pick up the front page of the Daily Trust this morning, if the producer can help us with that, the Daily Trust, it does say food prices have dropped in Kano, Taraba, Kwara and Niger. And I wanted to ask you, do you think we are focusing too much on the federal government at this time? Are we misdirecting, you know, this anger and this protests against the federal government? For instance, in what we saw in Oyo State yesterday, we see food prices have dropped in Kano. Remember Kano, we had a raid or raids of hoarders of food grains. I mean, what's the message here when you look at this state and you look at what's happening in Oyo?
In other words, what are the state governments doing?
Exactly.
Well, at this way, you know, when we started this discussion, I talked about the warped system of government that we practice. And that is why everybody is always looking at the center, the federal government. They take the lion's share of whatever is the revenue that the country gains. So the discussion again is how do we decentralize? If you do not do that decentralization, then states will not be held responsible responsible. In fact, states have a problem because a lot of them cripple the local governments. The funds that belong to the local governments, which is closer to the people, they hijack them. That's a problem. So if you try, to review the system and see that we practice a truly federal system of government, then I think that it will get better. And then politicians themselves have to behave properly and say, you know what, we are being appointed or elected to be accountable to the people, so we need to do the right thing. Yes, not only federal government, but if you do not reduce the powers of the federal government, this over-centralization and focus on them will continue.
I hope you're not making excuses for the state governments. They
I
can
am
still
not.
do something before the federal. You can't fold your hands and say,
Considering that they are
because
receiving more money,
we're
Dr.
not-
Ikokwu.
Yeah.
The federal allocation to them has increased.
Yeah, but that's just a quick one. The international scene, The Guardian, it says, stand with me. Yulia Navalnaya vows to continue her husband's fight. Lula of Brazil says there has to be an investigation, not just to criticize Kremlin or Putin.
Quick disclaimer, I am not standing for state government. They should do their jobs.
Yes.
Anyway, to Russia, yes. So this story, we see that Alexei's wife has been very brave. And I think it's because she has been in this journey with her husband all these years. She understands the risk and the implications of what they were doing. She seems to be a fighter herself and is asking Russians to back her and to continue the fight. It's unlikely that this will happen, that Russia will change in the medium to long term. I mean, Putin seems to have a total grip on the country. But I think there are people that do things out of conviction, and Alexa and his wife, I think they knew that at some point it might cost a life, and they decided to go on with their convictions. If you're not ready to die for anything, then you will stand for anything. I think a lot of people understand that. A tragic story, it's unfortunate, but I think she will continue to be who she was, and wants to see a free Russia. We don't know when that will happen. We'll watch and see.
Indeed, and at the moment she does have the support of the West and some world leaders who are calling for, justice to be done. Thank you so much, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. We
You're
always
welcome.
appreciate your time here on Daybreak.